For nearly 70 years, from 1922 to 1991, the territory of the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, better known as the USSR, at its greatest height encompassed 15 republics stretched over 22 million square miles, a sixth of the Earth's land surface. From its capital Moscow, a singular party centralized government ruled everything from Eastern Europe to the easternmost lands touching the Pacific Ocean, and with it, one institute bankrolled the entire nation. The USSR provides a fascinating piece of history, but it's never easy to know if you're looking at the truth or a modified version of it. Even understanding the monetary system isn't easy, as its government wasn't too keen on exposing itself beyond the confines of its borders. But as they say, people talk, and with that talk comes the truth. Historians called the revolution of February 1917 as the unbloodiest revolution in human history. But as Nicholas Poppe, a prominent Altaist from Saint Petersburg, pointed out, it soon turned into the most devastating as far as loss of human lives, property, and cultural values were concerned. A civil war in 1918 resulted in the murder of the Tsar's family and the invasion of the Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and occupation of south of Russia in the Crimea were underway. Property of citizens across the republics, including Russia, were confiscated, and people with any signs of wealth, according to Poppe, were branded as parasites, assigned to the exploiter class. Everyone was demoralized by dire poverty, hunger, and hopelessness, he continued. The emergence of the national currency, the Soviet ruble, after the wake of the 1917 Russian Revolution did little good, but a new economic policy in 1919 led by Lenin would help what little it could. The ruble would go through 7 redenominations since its initial issue in 1919, but two things remained constant. Soviet rubles weren't evenly distributed, and there was a clear line drawn in the proverbial sand between the rich and the poor. But before we dive too deep into the economics of the USSR and how it worked, or in this case, didn't work for its people, let's look back at the Soviet ruble and the simple process of purchasing basic items. Today, Americans, or those of the West, are used to a system of we see it, we want it, we buy it. There are few restrictions on what the US dollar or the pound sterling or most forms of currency in free nations can buy, outside of rare black market items. For the people of the communist Soviet Union, it wasn't nearly as easy, and anything foreign came with an incredibly high price tag. Whereas the free market economy of, say, the United States allowed its people to rely on purchasing power and own private small business, that wasn't the case behind the Iron Curtain. Outside of small family-owned farms tucked away in the deepest reaches of the transcontinental country, the government had control of 98% of trade. Though its people craved it, especially after World War II, consumerism was not central to the Soviet Union's economy. That doesn't mean people didn't find a way to get around the nation's strict rules on foreign products. All they needed to do was get their hands on foreign money. By 1964, types of stores called Berezka, meaning little birch trees, began sprouting up in major cities across the Russian SSR, with similar chains opening in other republics. Berezka became so well known for being a supermarket that catered to the highly privileged, a limited group that included diplomats, military leaders, and athletes, anyone with foreign currency. The success of these stores caught the eye of foreign newspapers like the New York Times, which hailed the shops with headlines like, "Soviet is raking in profits at shops for foreigners." However, its citizens were resourceful, and those that could secure foreign currency found that shopping at a Berezka-type shop was no longer out of reach. Once relegated to purchasing potatoes, vodka, and the basic necessities, foreign currency gave citizens the power to purchase higher-end items like actual meat and spirits other than vodka. Even apparel from the West drove Soviets mad, and they would pay a pretty penny if they had it. So now we're left wondering how exactly a body of government had such a tight grip on its flow of money. For the USSR, the answer is Gosbank. Originally spurred from the ideals of Tsarist Russia and the beliefs of revolutionary and Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin, Gosbank, or the State Bank, was state-run. It was the central force of all things dealing with the USSR's finances. At the heart of the Soviet economy was a singular banking system overseen by Gosbank. Unlike most countries today, there was only one bank that handled both commercial and consumer-level banking. Prior to 1963, private household savings were held in a separate savings bank, Sberbank. But that, along with the state investment of Stroybank and the foreign trade bank of Bank, were all controlled by Gosbank. It wasn't a complicated system, but it allowed the government to control nearly every facet of production and sales. Mark Lieberman put it best with his example of following the chain of milk in his book, Banking in the Former Soviet Union. The short of it was, if you follow the output of milk all the way from the farmer's production to the consumer's purchase, you'll find that Gosbank had its hands in just about every step. When the milk is delivered, the farmer receives an invoice that's turned over to the bank. Gosbank credits the farm with the cost of the milk and takes it from the recipient's account. The supply chain was dictated and regulated by Gosbank, right up until when the consumer purchases an item and that cash winds up back with the state bank. At a working level, Gosbank even had a hand in doling out workers' wages. Every monetary aspect of life filtered through Gosbank, including how much money was allocated for worker pay. And the system of determining pay wasn't one that favored the working class individuals. Though there were plans in place to improve wages, such as the 5-year plan that was to increase wages upwards of 68%, by the 1930s, things were taking a turn for the worse. Between labor shortages and low pay rates, it was rare for households to have a surplus of cash. Amassing wealth was more for notable figures, but when private citizens did save money, they had one option. They could keep it secure in Sberbank, but of course, that came with a price. Anything kept in Sberbank was technically property of Gosbank, and that money could be used as a revenue source for the Soviet Union. Much has changed since the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union nearly 30 years ago. Today, the Russian ruble stands in place for the Soviet ruble, but only for the country of Russia. The other former republics deal their own currency. And as for Gosbank, it was ultimately replaced by Central Bank of the Russian Federation, a far less strict, independent banking system that allowed for the rise of commercial banks.